Hello, my name is Melissa Goltra. I'm one of the managing partners at Focus Training, and I'm here today with AJ Watson. AJ, can you share with us all a bit more about your role both at Focus Training as a facilitator and trainer and within the organization where you also primarily work?
Absolutely. So with Focus Training, I'm an executive trainer. I've been with Focus for the better part of 20 years and really do a lot of work in our corporate and collegiate spaces, helping high potential leaders and leaders really think about enterprise kind of mindset and topics, but also those high potentials who are preparing for their first leadership opportunity. And then by day, I'm also the national director for Youth Guidance's Becoming a Man program, which is a male to male counseling mentoring program working with approximately 7,000 young men across about 8 different geographies, both here in the US and in the UK.
Amazing. Well, thank you for joining me today. We are talking about this topic of the concept of how everyone in America and globally is transitioning the way that they work and has been over the last year and a half. And I would love to hear some of your strategic level thoughts about this concept of rather than return to work, let's say return to office. As we're migrating back towards working in offices, what are some of your big picture thoughts about that as a strategic level leader for your organizations?
As we're thinking about return to work, return to office in our context, I think there's a few kind of overarching thoughts that we're navigating. So first, it certainly has been taking up a lot of our mind share as we think about how to do this for our staff across a number of different contexts. But at the center of all this, first and foremost, is safety. So we've got to make sure that we're bringing folks back in a way that is safe. And that means taking a look at our physical plant, how it's currently laid out. Does that mean capacity limits? Does that mean rotating schedules? Really prioritizing safety and what is the public health guidance both in the country, but also in each of our different geographies and markets. I think the second piece, though, we're also being really mindful of is being respectful of folks' individual preferences. So we've used a lot of surveying to really hear directly from our staff on their level of comfort and desire to both come back in person or to remain in some sort of remote or hybrid work environment. And I think the other piece that is maybe unique to us is that we have a central office for many of our finance, IT, HR functions, and some of our leadership functions in our programming side, but we also, the vast majority of our staff work in schools. And so these are in districts like Chicago, Los Angeles, Seattle, Kansas City, Washington, D.C. in the fall. So a number of different places and also internationally in the United Kingdom. So it's really about paying very close attention to what are the leaders of those different systems saying. Are they mandating vaccines? Are they mandating in person? How are they thinking about their pods and structures to make sure that we're keeping young people safe? And so really it's a dynamic process. And I think what I would encourage folks to be thinking about is one, what data are you using to help inform and drive your decisions, right? I highly recommend some sort of survey or focus groups or trying to get data directly from your staff. Two is making sure that your HR policies are clear, but also flexible and really looking at people on a case-by-case basis. And then last is that this is going to be an ongoing evolution, that there'll be spikes and flare-ups. There'll be steps forward and steps back and needing to be just very communicative and over communicating with your staff and your teams about where things stand, how decisions are being made, and where they can go to get more information if they want to know more.
I love that you're drilling down on this idea of communication being so important. I think we talk about that as the glue of leaders to teams. Can you make some recommendations on what a strategic level leader can do if there's apprehension in their employee base about returning to the office? What can we do to create that motivation or comfort?
Yeah, listen, I think as we think about the idea of apprehension and folks returning to the work site, I think the first place to start is with self and to really be honest with yourself about your own apprehensions or your own concerns and considerations. And also really try to be respectful and try to put yourself in the shoes of the different constituency groups within your employee base or organization's base. When we collect the data from our staff, we saw very different levels of comfort and desire that broke down on age, race, gender, All the different ways you might think things could break, they did. And we also see them differently in different parts of the country. So I, for myself, currently reside in Atlanta, Georgia, which is a function, frankly, of the pandemic and relocating. And so the level of openness that exists in my geography relative to our main office in Chicago have been very different throughout the course of the pandemic. And so I had a chance to be back in our main office a little while ago, and it hit me like a ton of bricks that my level of comfort moving through the space was very different than those folks who have been experiencing the pandemic in a place that's maybe been more restrictive with their guidelines and their recommendations. So I think it's really about understanding, empathy, but also trying to solve for what's going to work for the vast majority of folks, and then being really thoughtful on those individual or smaller cases. How do we make those accommodations, and what's our decision making process by which we're going to make those decisions? Because I think at the end of the day, we all just want all of our staff to feel comfortable and feel confident, and that's going to look different for different folks. And at some point, you may need to think about incentives. You may need to think about shifts in how you think about structuring and setting up your physical plant. For us, we have quite a few cubicles, and that's been problematic, frankly, to have folks back in that space during the majority of the pandemic. But we just got word that the city of Chicago is going to be opening up around the 4th of July, and so we're planning some of our first in-person gatherings for later that month. But we are planning for both in-person activities and hybrid. I think hybrid engagement is going to be a core part of how we move forward. So expecting that, making sure we have the right systems and tools and technology, and then we'll just continue to assess as we move forward.
That's great. I appreciate you talking about this concept of hybrid and thinking about that as a piece of the puzzle. When we think about organizational culture, so how our companies function and work and the spirit of those organizations, how do leaders at the managerial level or the strategic level need to be thinking about the concept of a hybrid culture? What are your thoughts or perspectives about that, and any recommendations you can share?
Yeah, absolutely. For us, as we think about culture in this kind of new world of work, I think a big learning for us came actually from our direct engagement with our youth and young people that we serve. So the work that we do is essentially, as I described it, is in person, in schools, in groups, which is pretty much the exact opposite of what the public health guidance would encourage you to be doing during the pandemic. And so it has been a massive disruption for us in the way that we've had to think about and pivot supporting our youth. But I think what we've also become really comfortable with is that we can still have high engagement, even if the majority of the screens on the in the Hollywood squares are off, right? If the cameras are off, does not mean that our young people aren't engaged. And I think it's instructive for us to take that and really apply that also to our adults. We know that with people working from home or in hybrid settings, there's different demands, as we've learned over the past 12 to 18 months, on someone's time, whether that's trying to do e-learning and navigate young children or family members, interactions with spouses and extended families, or just the number of things that someone might be out and about trying to get some errands in during the workday, because it just doesn't work so well in the way that they've had to flex their schedule with them and their partner or individually. So I think it's really about understanding that the culture is changing, but I think we've been really, both excited and humbled to know that we've been able to onboard new staff. We've been able to bring on leaders across geographies, launch entire programs, even in the midst of this more virtual hybrid work setting. And it's given, I think, me and us collectively a ton of confidence that we can still maintain our organizational culture because we're clear on our core values and what we stand for. Meeting youth where they are, being our best, being an ongoing process. And just this idea that we're going to continue to stand by those core values, even if the where they are has changed and evolved in this current environment. So I think it's still about doubling down on what are your core values and beliefs, and how do they apply in this new context, and what are maybe some of the sacred cows that we used to hold dear that we've had to learn we can actually let go of, and are there new opportunities opened up because of that more generative space and innovation we've had to think about. So I'm a very relational guy. I can't do my walk-arounds in the morning in the hallways like I used to, but I use Slack or Zoom or text messages or lots of other mechanisms to make sure I'm staying in contact with my colleagues. And that's really helped to move the place forward, but also still making sure that we're holding space for people to be processing through the incredible trauma that we've all experienced, I think, as a collective nation and society more broadly. So it's going to be a journey, and we're going to continue to, I think, to reevaluate what's working, what's not, and try to get rapid feedback as much as possible.
So many great takeaways there. And what do you feel is the value of returning to office? Why is it important from your perspective?
Yeah, listen, for us, return to office is, some organizations have been asking the question, and we've asked the question, should we actually return to in-person work or in-person programming? I think we're very clear for our programming that we absolutely have to find a pathway back to in-person programming. As effective as the work has been virtually, there are just some things about sitting in circle and holding space for our young people, being able to look each other in the eye and read that body language, that our core programming really benefits from. And so we are absolutely going to be prioritizing our return to in-person work at our program level in our school sites across geographies. I think at the adult level and the staff level, it's a little bit more dynamic. It's still important, but we've also come to, I think, an understanding that a lot of work can be done remotely. Yet for us, we know, like, we've got to have, like, innovation and serendipity and some of those on the margin conversations that have been the hallmark of office work for so long, really are best done in person. And there is a real desire to come back. I had a chance to be back in our main office with a small group of our staff maybe a month ago, and it just felt so good to have that, to be able to touch, right, hug, high five, elbow bump, whatever it was, still potentially with the right social distance, but just to be in person and not have to be coming on and off of mute right on a Zoom or Teams or Google call. Having said that, I think it's really still a core part of what we plan to do with our staff is bringing them back in person. There's so much just kind of quick 5, 10-minute, 2-minute conversations that we know can occur. And we know not everyone's going to be there. So it's going to be a constant effort of, I think we've broken some of our norms or just routines about, does every meeting that we've had have to happen? Can these things be done in different ways? Can they be asynchronous? Can we record and send out recordings, or take much better notes and send those things out? Use our tools like Slack to have more real-time communication. So things have changed, but I think there's still a huge value for us. We find a huge value in bringing our staff together and having that in-person interaction as often as possible.